You've seen the watches, you've admired the glitz, and heard the stories. But let's be real for a second. There are so many myths surrounding Rolex that it can be hard to separate fact from fiction. So, if you've ever believed any of these super common Rolex myths, it's time for a little reality check. Stick around as I debunk 5 Rolex myths that you've probably heard before. And get ready to have your mind blown. Let's get into it. Myth number 1. Rolex watches don't tick. You've probably heard it before. Rolex watches have a perfectly smooth, sweeping seconds hand, so they don't tick. That sounds pretty magical, doesn't it? Almost like a Rolex is the holy grail of smoothness, with no ticking, just a mesmerizing sweep of the hand. But here's the real story. While it is true that Rolex second hands appear smoother than many other watches, they are still ticking, just in a way that's harder to detect. Rolex watches operate with mechanical movements that beat at 28,800 vibrations per hour. But what does that actually mean? Well, while the second hand does seem to move smoothly, it's actually making micro ticks, about 8 ticks per second to be precise. This creates a smoother motion than your average quartz watch, but it's still not as fluid as you might have imagined. So, despite the beautiful illusion, the Rolex seconds hand is still performing tiny, rapid ticks. The difference is that these ticks are fast enough that they're almost imperceptible to the naked eye. Now, let's really shake things up. Rolex has made quartz watches in the past. Yeah, you just heard that right. The Oyster Quartz series was part of that lineup. And guess what? Those watches tick once per second, just like your typical quartz watch. So if you thought that every Rolex had that magical, seamless second hand, think again. There's a bit of myth busting going on here. Not every Rolex is the smooth, mythical masterpiece that you might have envisioned. It's time to get real and not fall for the hype. Myth number 2. Rolex never made quartz watches. Well, as I just said, Rolex has actually made quartz watches. Most people automatically assume that Rolex is all about those iconic mechanical movements and that they are the gold standard when it comes to automatic timekeeping. But the truth is, during the 1970s quartz crisis, Rolex stepped out of its comfort zone and ventured into the realm of quartz technology. If you've never heard of it, well then let me introduce you to the Oyster Quartz series. This line, which included models like the Oyster Quartz Datejust and the Oyster Quartz Day-Date, featured in-house quartz movements developed by Rolex themselves. Now, we know that quartz watches have a reputation for being more affordable, and it might seem a little out of character for a brand like Rolex to dip into the quartz game. But let me tell you something. Rolex didn't just slap a quartz movement in an oyster case and call it a day. They designed and produced a high-end quartz movement to maintain the brand's exceptional standards of quality. The Oyster Quartz collection lasted for over 25 years, from the mid-1970s until the early 2000s. These watches weren't just any quartz timepieces. They had Rolex craftsmanship built into their very core. The cases were made of stainless steel or gold, and the movements were accurate and durable, as you'd expect from anything with the Rolex name. But as the quartz crisis faded and the mechanical watches saw a resurgence, Rolex stopped producing them. So the next time that someone tells you that Rolex never made quartz watches, well, you can confidently set them straight. The Oyster Quartz proves that Rolex is far more versatile than we sometimes give them credit for. It's a little reminder that even the most iconic brands can step outside their comfort zones when necessary. Rolex wasn't just watching the quartz revolution happen, they were part of it. Myth number 3. Rolex invented the first waterproof watch. Here's a big one. Rolex invented the first waterproof watch. Now, while we all know and love the Rolex Oyster case, which was indeed revolutionary in water resistance, the truth is that Rolex did not invent the first waterproof watch. Yes, the Oyster case, introduced in 1926, was an absolute game changer because it provided an airtight seal, protecting the delicate movement from not only water but also dust and dirt. It was a giant leap in watchmaking, and it revolutionized the industry. But here's where the myth gets busted. Other manufacturers had already developed water-resistant designs before Rolex made the Oyster. In fact, several brands were experimenting with waterproof or water-resistant features in watches even before Rolex came up with the Oyster case. What Rolex did, however, was nail the marketing. In 1927, to prove the durability of the oyster case, Rolex took things to another level with Mercedes Gleitze, a famous English Channel swimmer. She wore a Rolex oyster while swimming across the channel. And to the amazement of many, the watch was still ticking after hours of exposure to water. This clever move solidified Rolex's reputation as the go-to brand for water resistance. No one else made a splash quite like Rolex did. So, while Rolex didn't invent waterproof watches, they certainly marketed them like nobody else. Thanks to their savvy branding and strategic use of real-world proof, the oyster case became synonymous with water resistance. It's a perfect example of how sometimes great marketing is just as powerful as great innovation. Myth number 4. Rolex watches are handmade. Let's get one thing straight here. If you've ever believed that Rolex watches are entirely handmade, I hate to break it to you, my friend, but that's a myth. Sure, we all associate Rolex with exceptional craftsmanship, and rightfully so, but the process is far from entirely handmade. Today, Rolex watches are made using a mix of human skill and cutting-edge machinery. In fact, robots are heavily involved in the manufacturing process, especially when it comes to tasks that require extreme precision, like fitting parts together with the exact right amount of pressure. These machines are designed to achieve consistent accuracy in ways that human hands just can't always match. But don't get it twisted. While robots handle some of the grunt work, human expertise is still very much at the core of Rolex's watchmaking. Skilled watchmakers are the ones who assemble the movements, regulate the accuracy, and then fine-tune the most intricate parts of the process. After all, it's not just about fitting together parts, it's about ensuring that every movement runs smoothly, every complication functions perfectly, and that the watch meets Rolex's famously exacting standards. So while Rolex is certainly no stranger to state-of-the-art technology, the human touch is still essential in creating the brand's legendary timepieces. It's a partnership between man and machine, blending the best of both worlds. Rolex watches may not be purely handmade, but the craftsmanship involved is second to none. And myth number 5, Rolex watches are the most expensive luxury watches. Here's a misconception that's easy to believe. Rolex is the most expensive luxury watch brand. Now, while Rolex is definitely a premium brand, and its timepieces can fetch some seriously high prices, it is far from being the most expensive watchmaker out there. Sure, a Rolex Daytona or a Sky Dweller can cost you a pretty penny, sometimes over 10 grand or even more for special editions. There are brands out there that put Rolex's price tags to shame. Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Vacheron Constantin regularly produce watches that not only exceed Rolex prices, but also surpass them by quite a bit, particularly when we're talking about limited editions, high complications, or rare models. We're talking watches that can easily hit 6 figures, and in some cases, even more. So why does Rolex hold such a strong position in the luxury watch world if it's not the priciest? Well, that's where Rolex really shines. Rolex's reputation isn't built on being the most expensive. It's based on being durable, precise, and timelessly designed. It offers a watch that, for its price, provides exceptional value. The build quality, the engineering, and the resale value of a Rolex make it an unparalleled choice for those who want luxury without breaking the bank, like other rarer brands. In essence, Rolex's true power lies in its ability to deliver a luxury watch that combines quality, craftsmanship, and value, something that many other high-end brands can't match, especially when you consider how durable and iconic Rolex models remain over time. While Rolex isn't the priciest on the block, it is arguably one of the best investments in the world of luxury watches. And well, that's all from my side. The next time you hear one of these myths, you're going to be ready to share the truth with confidence. Do you have some insights that you'd like to share with us? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will be sure to respond to every single one of you. Like and subscribe if you love elegant timepieces. And if you don't subscribe, it means I'll just have to wait another day to onboard you. Catch you in the next one.